This is a simple and powerful dialogue system for Godot that is unlike anything else that's out there right now. I built this plugin because I found myself frequently being interrupted out of my writing flow state. So I needed a tool that allowed me to keep my writer's hat on without having to switch back and forth between programmer hat, QA hat, designer hat. So today I am finally making this dialogue plugin publicly available as an open source project. And not only that, on this video, I am starting a series on how to use this plugin for different types of dialogues, so you can see directly from me how to use this plugin in your own project. Starting with, on this video today, a classic branching dialogue in the style of CRPG, like the currently popular Baldur's Gate, for example. So stick around till the end to not miss any functionalities of the tool and to hear about some of the design philosophy and warnings for best practices using it. But before all that, real quickly, I promise it's gonna be real quick. If you want to support directly the kind of development I'm doing on tools like these or the contents I'm creating, you can find me on Patreon. As a member, you will have top priorities on Q&As and feature requests for anything I do on this channel. And I really couldn't do this without your support. So thank you. You can find me on patreon.com/EzDialogue. So a few months ago, I revealed the earlier version of this plugin in a video, and I actually received a lot of feedback asking for this tool to be available. Now, I knew this might be helpful for some of you, but I didn't really anticipate how many of you were out there. As much as I wanted to release it immediately for everybody to use, at the time it was in the just right state because it was just for me. So as long as I knew how to work around the bugs and issues, it was fine. The tool was enough. Clearly, that's not going to be good enough for a public release. So I spent the last few months polishing up, fixing up some of the issues, some of the more obvious issues, and documenting a little bit to get ready for this video. I'm saying all of this to say, please have some patience if you run across any issues. If you do, leave it in the comments here, or as a issues or ticket in the GitHub repository that I'll link. Now, I'll try my best to address all the issues, but I cannot promise that I can get to it in a timely manner. Unless, though, if you're a Patreon member, then I will have to do it on top priority. But I'll stop self-promoting right now because I know that can get annoying. I don't want to look desperate. I am somewhat desperate, I guess you could say. I'm not that desperate. Okay, whatever. Okay, let's move on. I promise that's the last of that bit. So let's make some dialogues. All right, I'm gonna do this raw. It can't possibly go wrong. If something pops up during this demo, that's what it is. I should probably close the window real quick. I'll be back. So we have Godot right here. First thing, I'll create a new project, CRPG dialogue demo. Yeah, create and edit. So first thing I need to do is obviously I need to download the plugin. There should be a link to the plugin in the description below. Before the setup, let me just explain the repository real quickly. The entire repository is basically another Godot project. So Godot projects require their plugins to live under the directory called add-ons. So you can see the EzDialogue plugin is already in add-ons/EzDialogue. If you want to import the plugin into your own project, all you need to do is copy this EzDialogue directory into your own add-on directory in your own project. And this consists of this CRPG dialogue demo that's already there. So I've already created something there. It's nothing fancy, but basically we're going to try to reproduce it right now. So we're not going to pay attention to any of this except the plugin. So first thing you do is you download the repository, or you can pull it or fork it. And then I'm going to go to my project directory and create a folder called add-ons. And I'm going to bring the dialogue in there. Once you have done that, if that worked correctly, you go to project setting, plugins, and there should be already a developer as dialogue manager as a installed plugin for the project, and you can just enable it. And you can see on the top right here, the tab EzDialogue appears as soon as you enable it. Now, I don't know if it actually works fully just like that. So I'm going to reload the project in case it has an issue. So that's how to set up. Easy, right? It's just simple, copy and paste, and then go to your project setting and click enable, and it works. And you can see if you click on this tab, you have this, dialogue management window. Unfortunately, that's not where you start. Where you need to start is actually you want to create your dialogue display, like to show dialogues where you want to show the dialogue. And I'm gonna just set up a very simple one. So I'm gonna just create a node called dialogue box. I guess it's a capital dialogue box. I'm going to use a VBox container. So the way VBox container works is that as I add items, the items become a new row. The reason this is beneficial is because let's say I add a label, and then that is some dialogue content, and then I want to add choices. It'll automatically put the choice as a next item, so I don't have to worry about alignment. And there's a way to configure the container so that it grows in the positive Y direction or negative Y direction. So you have the choice of putting the entire container at the bottom and then make the box grow upwards. Then that would create the kind of like the Baldur's Gate style of dialogue and choice building. I'll move the box to the bottom center. So let's see what it looks like. You see a dialogue and choice button at the bottom center. And then let's see if I can grow. Here it is. If you do anchor point, you can do it. Vertical, grow direction, top. Yeah. And of course, there are some settings that you can set up that makes it better. But let's test it out here. A button. So you can see that it just grew upwards. If I add one more button, it'll go up. Yep, great. So the container is set up. So I'm going to attach a script to this dialog box and call it a dialog box script. So what I want is I want to be able to add text, some string text, and then have another one where I can add a choice, right? Choice text, let's say. All right. So when I'm adding a text, this is not the best practice, but I'm doing this for the sake of simplicity. I'm going to, let's say this is the text. I'm just going to directly grab that component and add text to be the string that is provided by the parameter. And when I'm adding a choice, instead of filling out the buttons, because it's a horizontal or vertical box container, I can just simply add as a child the button. So here I'm going to create a special button. I'm going to create a new scene, and that is a child of a button. Okay. And I'm going to call it choice button. It's going to have its own script. And let's call it choice button. So buttons respond by signals, right? So there are a bunch of signals here. You can see options. I want to handle the action when this button is pressed. So I have the pressed, and I can connect it to itself. And so you can see now it is connected to this on pressed. I'm also going to have a variable called choice index. I'm going to create another signal. Signal choice selected with choice index. And I'm going to emit that. So what's happening here? What's happening here is this, right? So we have a button here. Let's put a little text, sample text. And this is a button that players will be able to click. I want these buttons, when it's pressed, to emit a signal reporting what choice ID they belong to. So choice ID would be if there's choice number 1, 2, 3, 4. If I click choice number 1, it'll emit a signal saying choice has been selected 1. Or if I choose choice number 3, it'll say a choice has been selected that'll be emitted with the ID number 3 to tell that the choice that has been selected is number 3. So we go back to the dialog box and its script. Now we come back to this add choice. I need to load this custom choice button resource to instantiate from. So we got the choice button scene, let's say, and then I will preload it with this choice button right here. Oops, I spelled preload wrong. So I have this resource ready, and I can do something called a instantiate. So first I'm gonna have this button object, let's say. And then now I'm gonna say button object is choice button, right? So I'm identifying what it is, so I get the type. And then button object, I need to write choice index will equal to choice buttons size. And then I'm going to add this to the array at the back. And then I will also need to add this to the container. And then I just need to add this to a container. Yep. Now there's something missing. So I created this and I need to now handle it. I need to handle its functionality, its signal button object, and it's going to have a signal called choice selected. And then I'm going to connect it to a function called on choice selected choice index. And then it's going to do something. So I'm going to connect this signal to a call called on choice selected. So now when this button is clicked, this should trigger with the choice index. So let's test this out real quickly, okay? And the way I'm going to test it is on ready. So I'm going to say func ready. So this is when the game first starts and these objects are instantiated. This ready will be called. I'm going to call my add choice with this is choice number 1 or choice number 0. And then I'm going to add another choice that says this is choice number 1. Once I start the scene, there will be 2 new buttons in this dialog box. And when I click them, the console will print out the appropriate choice index. 0 for the first choice and 1 for the second choice to confirm that this is working. So let's run this. Oh, I didn't update the text. Whoops. I need to update the button text. So I'm going to say button text equals choice text. Here we go. Here it is. We got this is choice number 0. This is choice number 1. So if I click right here, choice number 0, click, you see 0. If I do 1, you see 0. So that's wrong. All right. Why is this 0? It shouldn't be. All right, so I had to fix this. If I do on ready after instantiating, it's going to replace it. Now let's see. All right, so on the output below right here, if I click this is choice number 0, you get 0. And if you click this is choice number 1, you get 1. All right, so it's working. We see that the signal, the function of adding a choice is working properly, and then handling the signal is working properly as well. So now we have a simple dialog box. Now the next thing I need to do is obviously I need to clear all this, right? The clear dialog box, and that is as simple as just making the text empty and then iterating through all the choices in this choice buttons array, removing them from the container. So I'll say remove child choice button. Oh, like that. And then I'm going to just simply empty out the array. So after clear has been done, the dialog text will be empty, and then the choice will be gone, and the choice button array will be reset. We are ready to write some dialogue. Let's start with a simple text dialogue. So we're going to go to EzDialogue by clicking on the tab, and then create my first node. So by default, the node name start is the starting point. So I'm going to name this start and say, this is a dialogue text. Isn't this easy? All right, so this is what I'm expecting. I'm going to save this. I'm saving it as a dialog JSON, and it's up down here. There is a little bug. If you don't see a JSON file, even though you saved it in the resource folder, sometimes you have to open it directly from the script by doing open and then looking for the dialog and then opening it up once before closing it. Then it'll start to show up again. I don't know why it does that. It's one of the bugs that Godot has where it doesn't automatically see JSON file unless you opened it with script. So that's a little tip there. You know what? Might as well, while we have this, let's make a choice as well. So we have a question mark and bracket. This is indicating that I'm about to write a prompt. So in other words, it's a choice. I'll say, this is a choice number 1. And I want this to go to a choice 1 node. So this is another node. This can be named anything. Basically, that should be the name of the node that you want to go to. Let's say this is choice number 1 node. So if I correct this title, it should automatically connect it. So I say choice number 1 node. Yep. And then you see the line here. And having one choice is kind of lame, so I'm going to add another one. This is a choice number 2. And then I'm going to name this choice number 2 node. So I have this choice number 2 node. You got it connected. And then, you know, let's have a little response on the choice number 1 and say, you chose number 1. Yay. And then on this one, we'll say, you chose number 2. Boo. Cool. All right. Now that we have the dialogue ready and saved, I'm going to now add a dialog parser. So the way to do that is you right click and then you add a child node and then look for EzDialogue. And you can see right here, and it adds this little dialog parser. And you can see the way you're supposed to work with this is by working with Signal. What you do here is that you provide the EzDialogue with the JSON file, the JSON file of the dialogue that has been saved by this editor. And then when you hand it over to the dialog handler, it'll process it and emit signal saying that, hey, here's a response that has been created, or here is a custom signal that you need to handle right now. And then you will take that response and then display it to the user. So let's handle the response. So we have dialog generated response. And then I'll handle it in the dialog box for now. You can do it anywhere. You can do it as self if you want, but I'll do it in here. So first thing first, the response is in the shape of dialog response. And you can see right here, dialog response consists of text and choices, array of strings both. Add text, I think it's called add text. Yeah, add text and then go response.text. And then it's going to go iterate through choice in response. And then add choice, the choice text. Now, before we are ready to run the dialog, you need to provide the dialog handler with this JSON file. So I'm going to go here. This is the game. I'm going to create a new script. And on ready, I'm going to provide the EzDialogue with as EzDialogue. So we have this EzDialogue node, and I'm going to start dialog. And then you can see the parameter requires you to hand over a dialog file, a state, in a dictionary format, and then on optional starting node. So this is what I mentioned earlier. By default, it is a start node that it's looking for, and you can change it if you want to. So right now I'm going to just provide, let's do it the fancy way. So I'm going to do export var dialog JSON. And so this will be provided, and then state, let's say onReady var state is this, some dictionary for now. So this is it. This is how it starts, and then it'll emit signal and dialog box will handle it. Actually, the better way to do it is probably to handle this signal in the game. You know what? Let's do that. That's probably cleaner. Let's do that. I'm going to disconnect that. Disconnect. I'm going to copy this. So I'm going to have this dialog generated be handled by the main node where, so I'm going to come here. So it created this method right here or function right here, get the dialog box, and then call add text, and then response text, and then go over response choice in response choices, and then call dialog box add choice. That's the function that I added earlier, and then list choice here. So whenever the EzDialogue handler emits a signal saying dialog has been generated, it'll take the response, it'll handle that signal, and then populate the dialog box with the text that's given. And if there are choices, it'll also populate it with the choice. Simple enough. And then it already started it. Now, this one is empty. It's not. So we want to assign this. If you go to inspector, now that it's export, so you should be able to do this. You can create a new JSON, or you can quick load. So dialog JSON is already there. Another way to do it is to just simply click and drag. And then now it's populated. You can save. All right. Now that it's saved, if I run it, I'm expecting this first node to present itself. I'm not handling the choices yet, so nothing should happen when I click on the choices, but at least it should show the text and the choices. So if I run it, whoops, I misspelled this. Okay, if I misspelled this correctly. So if I run it, ta-da! Okay, you have, this is a dialog text, isn't this easy? And then you have choice number 1 and choice number 2. Cool. Now, the next thing is I want to be able to handle the choices and then hand it over to the EzDialogue. So in the dialog box, once again, remember we had this function preset to know when the choice is selected. So when the choice is selected, you want to let the dialog node know that the choice has been selected. So we have, let's say, EzDialogue as EzDialogue. So I'm doing this as keyword to type the this generic resource or the generic node, literal node, to get the hint. You don't have to do that, but I'd like to do it because sometimes I don't remember it. So we have the start dialog and then the next function. So the next function is what you want to call. So next function means give me the next part of the dialog. And you can see it anticipates a choice index as a parameter. And if a dialog doesn't require you to have a choice as a response, you can just leave it empty or give it 0, or it doesn't matter. It ignores this choice index and moves on to the next portion of the dialog. But if it is anticipating a choice, then you want to provide the choice index that has been selected. So I say choice index. That's not all. So we need to make sure that when we're moving on to the next, we want to clear the dialog. So what we do here in the main game logic again, when the response comes, actually, I don't want to just add it. I want to make sure that the dialog box is cleared. If I remember, it's clear dialog box. So we're going to call that clear dialog box function. So every time a response is generated, it'll reset the dialog box. So this should work. we have a choice. If I do click number 1, it moved on to number 1. And then if I restart it and then click number 2, you can see you chose number 2, boo. And then that's it. I mean, that's the gist of it. Now you can do a bunch of cool things, right? Let's say I have a state variable saying, I don't know, show only 1. And then true. Let's say this is a state, right? Then I can come here. I can do cool things like conditionals now, right? I can do if, what was it? Show only 1. Like this, right? So this means if show only 1 is true, do not show the second choice. And right now, you can see right here it's true. So if I run it, I should only see 1 choice. Bam. Now if I change this to false, it shows both as expected. Another thing you can do is, let's say I want to inject some variable, state variable. So I can say player name, and then say Ezra, right? I'm gonna say right here, hello player name. Then this variable should show up. So this $ bracket surrounding a variable name means grab this variable's value and inject it into the dialog. So if I play this, bam, it says, hello Ezra, this is a dialog text, isn't that easy? Cool, cool, cool. Let's talk about transition. So we talked about transitioning from a choice selection. We talked about controlling the choice with the conditional. But what about transitioning without any choices? Can you do that? And answer is yes. You can just simply do transition like that. So this will not wait on the player's response. It'll just immediately transition. It'll say, isn't this easy? And then say you chose number 1. So let's see what it looks like. I'm going to save. You can see right here, hello Ezra, this is a dialog text, isn't it easy? And then you see you chose number 1, yay. One caveat here is that it didn't include it as a new line there, which I guess I should fix that, huh? Just be aware of that, I suppose. I suppose if I do space and enter, will that fix it? Oh no. Well, that's one bug that I should fix. So don't use that if that's going to be a problem. Another thing is you can say if, let's say, variable transition 1 is true, then do choice number 2. And then I can also do else choice number 2 node. So this will only transition to 1 if the state variable transition 1 is true. Otherwise, it's going to go to 2. I'm going to add that value. True. Then it should go to number 1. So you see you chose number 1 here. If I is false, it should go to number 2. Number 2. So that works. It's funny because I'm questioning if it'll work. It has been a while since I've done all these like testing. I'm doing this raw right now. So as I'm doing this, I'm questioning myself if it's actually going to work. So that's if I feel if I look unsure about something, that's why. So I'm gonna go back to Control Z and then go back to the choice here, choice 1 and 2, default. Now let's talk about custom signals. That's kind of important because that's the way to invoke any custom functionalities. You would use that to either start a sound effect, start an animation, start a image transition, or even do some simple calculation. Let's see. I'm thinking right now, I'm gonna call a signal where it's going to change the variable. Let's do that. Let's do a thing where it changes the variable. So let's say variable value before custom signal equals, and then I'm going to call some variable. And then I'm going to do signal. And then it's a just like comma separated string within this parentheses. It doesn't really care about the format. It's going to grab the entire string between the parentheses and then give it to you to handle. So, you know, formatting of how the signal parameters look like is up to you. I like to do it as a comma separation of functionality and then the variables or parameters. So let's say I'm going to call this a set variable, and then I'm going to say some variable and then value 2. And then now the variable value is, then I'm going to show some variable. So expectation here is that I will assign this some variable in the state a value of 0, right? So initially it's going to show equals 0. And then once this is called, I want this to become 2. Now it's not going to work immediately right now. I need to handle custom signal and provide this functionalities. So how do you do that? Go back to the script and install signal. If you go to the EzDialogue node, and if you go back to the kind of signals that it can emit, you can see that one of the main signals are custom signal received with a value. So this is what you want to handle. So if you double click and then provide it to, let's say, node 2D, the root node, it creates this function. And so this value is equal to whatever's in between these parentheses as a string. So what I want to do here is that immediately I'm going to split with comma. I don't know if you can actually do that. I'm going to type this so that it tells me, it yells at me if something's not wrong, if something's wrong. Params. And I'm going to say if params first variable is set, and set variable command, variable name equals params1, variable value equals params2, right? And then in the state value, I'm going to replace variable name, variable name with the variable value. So this should work. Now I'm using if statement right here. Now probably the better practice as you overload this custom signal is to have a dictionary of custom signal name to its callable so that you can have O of 1 transaction time of immediately invoking and finding the custom functionalities instead of going through each of the conditional. But it's going to be a while before that actually impacts your performance. So I'm not worried about that right now. But just to let you know, the best practice of probably doing something like that is to use some sort of dictionary approach. But for now, this should be good. Like this should work. So let's test it. Bam, it says variable value before custom signal 0. Now the variable value is 2. It worked. Beautiful. Now something else. Notice how it did this, right? I want to be able to break between these two. So I want empty dialog, and then click on ... choice, and then move on to the thing without having to split into a 2 separate node. And the way to do that is use a break page, which is 3 dashes. So the response will be emitted on the ... triple dash, the page break, until that function next is called again. So when the next is called, it'll move on to the next step of the response. So it'll pause until the next is called. So the way we handle this, we gotta go back to the script and come here on the dialog generated. Now we gotta handle the case where choices are empty. So if I say if choices is empty, instead of doing that, I'm just gonna say dialog box add choice ... So what's going to happen? It's going to assign a choice text ... and then it's going to assign it choice index 0. So the way I implemented this button is that when the button is clicked, it'll call next, and that's all I need to do. And when there are no choices, it doesn't matter what choice index it is. So that ... would work just kind of naturally. So here, boom. We got variable value before custom signal 0, and then we got ... So the page break has been hit. If I click it, it should move on to the next one. It'll call signal, and then it'll assign it to 2, and then show 2 choices here. And then it works normally. And then now I got this, and it'll end. That's pretty much everything. We got page break, we got choices, we got branching, we got injection, we got custom signal. What else? And I think this is a good point to say, here's a best practice. So the many times I've worked with games and dialogues, and especially once you get to localization, voiceover recording, all those like dialogue specific handling, you really don't want to overburden your dialogue files with game logic. And as much as it is tempting to just start programming in this dialogue file, I recommend that you avoid doing that. I could easily add another keyword here to make it say, I can assign variable on file. I can change variables on file and call function directly, do some basic GD script based scripting. But I purposely didn't do that. I wanted people to just use it for a flow control and dialogue writing more than anything, so that you actually focus on writing the narrative instead of having to program within this. So, you know, that's the one design philosophy. Some people might disagree with that approach. From my experience, I've worked with one, I guess, like major IP type of game, and there I also developed my own dialogue management. That was a little bit, that could handle a little bit more functionality, and that actually hurt me because as a developer, I would overload the dialogue with certain functionality and be like, hey, you can do that. And then later when the note comes in to say, hey, we got to change this dialogue to do this, or we got to change some wording, or like break it into multiple nodes and choices, doing that becomes a little bit more complicated once you start overloading the dialogue metadata with game logic. So I'd say avoid doing that, even if you find some workaround to do that. Okay, another thing. I think one last thing here. You see how these choices, the prompts, directly leads to a node? What if I want to perform some dialogue or perform some signal before moving on? You can do that. Now, should you do that is another question, but you can do that. So the way to do that is you can do the prompt command, do the choice text, and then instead of doing the direct arrow, you can just open a bracket. And then here you can just go to choice number 1 node. And then you can also say, call another signal, say some variable equals 3, let's say. And then I can verify over here by saying, let's call this some variable. So you can see right here, I can confirm if I click the choice, it'll change the variable value to 3, and then it should display that. Right? So we got the page break. If I click number 1, it says 3. It works. More keen audience members probably have noticed that there is one more signal called end of dialogue reached. So this is a way for the dialogue manager to say, well, you don't need to call me next anymore. Like, we have reached the end. So do with it what you will. In this case, I want to have one more last choice of ... And once that has been clicked, dialogue should clear and nothing should happen. So here we are. We're going to go to the node. I'm going to connect it to the node. And on the end of dialogue reached, I want next to do nothing. So I could say, okay, let's say our is ... dialog done, false. And I could say if next, otherwise, clear dialog box, and then be empty. So over here, instead of assigning a self, it'll call that dialog box, and then is dialog done would be set to true. All right, let's see if that order of operation works. So we have some choices, and at the end, this is the last one. Clear, done. We made a dialog box, which you can customize however you want, right? This is not part of the plugin. Creating a dialog box is up to you, what that looks like. And then the dialog box handles adding of a choice, adding of a text, handling the choice selected. And then we added a EzDialogue node. Essentially, that is a dialog handler. This is what handles the dialog file that's been generated by this dialog editor. And then my main game logic received this dialog JSON, and obviously you can programmatically assign these JSON files for different, let's say, talking to different characters, different situation. And then you can pass it over to the dialog node saying start dialog. And whenever whenever you want to move on to the next part of the dialog, either because the page break happened and you pause the dialog, or you need to make a choice, you would call .next on this dialog handler. In this particular case, we handled it on the button press. And then lastly, well, not lastly, and then we had to add a custom signal handler for doing some custom signal based function. And then lastly, we added a dialog end of dialog reached signal. The way that it is designed right now, it can do between custom signal and flow control and node control and everything. There's a workaround to do basically anything you want. There's a funny thing about this. I can't even actually use this as a state manager. I mean, that could be your homework. I kind of want to hit on that. I'm wondering if it is actually beneficial to use this as a state manager for, like, let's say animation or enemy behavior. I think there's some benefit to it, but you know, if there's other plugin that is more dedicated to it, like, is there a reason to do that? I'm not sure. Like, besides the fact that I'm used to using it, maybe not. But yeah, that's the functionality, and that's the end of the video.